Get ready to marry Mr. Harrison." The man opposite me roared so furiously that his face turned purple. Face? Just a second ago, I was in my room getting ready to go to the mall, and now here I am, watching this surround sound mess. My brain couldn't piece the picture together, which is probably why I just stood there dumbfounded, looking at the man and trying to figure out what was going on. "Sir, who are you?" I finally managed to say the word after his tirade died down. To my shock, his response was such a hard slap that I flopped onto the floor and looked at him in disbelief. "How dare you talk to me like that, scoundrel?" He roared again. "Don't forget who's boss here." She thought she could escape. "It's good that Mr. Harrison's men are patrolling the estate. Get off your ass and go upstairs and let the servants get you ready." He turned 180 degrees and walked out through the double doors, leaving me sitting on the floor and staring after him in a daze. "Honey, let's go," said a trembling voice next to me. "Don't resist. We need to get you cleaned up before Mr. Harrison returns." My mother died 5 years ago, having outlived my father by only 6 months, and I was their late child. Still not knowing anything, I stood up hesitantly and followed a pretty woman of about 40-something, who persistently pulled me by the hand towards the exit. We walked up an impressive staircase with intricately carved balusters and down a large second-floor hallway into a small, cozy room. Waiting on a mannequin by the window was a cream dress that was clearly meant for me. 2 maids stood there, shifting anxiously from foot to foot and looking at each other. Meanwhile, I was still tormented by disbelief, although I was beginning to understand that this surreal situation was not a setup or a hoax. I just blinked in front of the mirror and ended up here. And if it was not a hallucination, then this here was very far from home, a truly alien scene. But I had no idea how I got into it, or how to get out. "What's happening?" I asked, hoping that the woman accompanying me would shed some light on the situation. Obviously, I was mistaken for someone else, and something told me that I would not like what awaited me. "You shouldn't have tried to run away, dear," the lady whispered between sobs, looking fearfully at the door and the maids. "Now Mr. Harrison is furious and will not forgive us." So she was my mother, frightened by a lord with a name befitting a god of war. Okay, I'll play along with this game. There will be time to figure out what and how and why they take me for someone else. "Mom," I decided to address her that way. "Please explain what is happening. When I was running, I tripped and hit my head on a stone. Now everything is in a fog. I don't remember anything." "Oh my God," she exclaimed, covering her mouth with her hands. "And they said they caught you carefully, but they must have been careless after all." "Please explain to me what's going on because I'm lost," I said, giving the maids a meaningful look. "Martha, Ida, please come out. I'll help our daughter myself. Just wait in your room so that the master does not see you." She gave the command, and the frightened girls quickly ran out the door. Left alone with me, she came up and hugged me, stroking my head soothingly. "Tell me," I begged her again. "What kind of escape was I planning and why?" "Darling, Mr. Jensen, as the head of our family, has decided to marry you to Mr. Harrison. But you didn't want this marriage. Your father would never allow you to be treated like this. He always said that you would marry for love, and he would only check and approve of your chosen one. Moreover, he would never have given you to this Mr. Harrison." She waved him off dismissively. "He became the head of the household, only according to documents, and immediately signed a marriage contract. The last thing I needed was someone like Old Man Harrison." I gritted my teeth in frustration. "If only I could figure out where I really am and how I should act." "That's why you plan to run away to the academy," she continued. "For 10 years now, an imperial decree has been in effect, allowing girls with magical abilities to enter any magical academy without the permission of the head of the family. Once admitted, no one can force them to leave against their will. During their studies and subsequent service, they are under the protection of the state." Oh my God, did she just say magic? So I'm not on Earth? "What magical abilities do I have?" I asked cautiously, still processing this revelation. "You're a naturalist," she sighed. "That's why your uncle refused to homeschool you after your abilities showed up. He said that an aristocrat need not embarrass herself by digging in the dirt like a commoner, even though your gift is incredibly rare and valuable. In fact, he probably never did. I don't want you to study magic at all. Then the office will find out about you and force him to send you to the academy. That's why he gave you this bracelet to weaken your magic, because everyone thinks you're not a magician. I idly fiddled with the dull metal band, adorned with sparkling stones, on my wrist. They put a blocker on me to hide me from the authorities until I was married off. Can it be removed? I asked immediately. As far as I know, no. The woman shook her head. Only the one who placed it can remove it, or the Imperial Magic Service. But first you have to get there. And who will let you? Thoughts began to swirl in my head again. Somehow I ended up in the house of this unknown girl, perhaps in another world. The only question now was I in my own body? Or, as in some books, had I landed in her body? With this thought, I jumped up from the couch and rushed to the mirror. Why didn't I think of looking earlier? It must have been a shock. Well, looking at me from the mirror was me, an exact copy, only 5 years younger. This is what I looked like when I was 16 or 17. So it was truly a case of soul reversal. And who organized this quest for me? And then what happened to the soul of the girl herself? If she were an untrained magician, she would not have been able to accomplish such a feat. So who was behind this? Secrets behind secrets. And why didn't anyone, not even you, report to the office when my abilities manifested themselves? Then they would have required me to study, and the wedding would probably have been postponed. I came to my senses. Nobody could talk about it. Mr. Jensen, as the head of the family, made everyone in the house take a magical oath of silence. She sighed. By the way, what's her name? I don't even know that much, but I can't ask without upsetting her even more. I'll have to wait until someone else gets away with it. Damn, how can I get out of this marriage? One thing is for sure. I will not stay with some old guy to please some random man. I don't know how long I'll be here, but if I allow anyone to come close to this body, it will be someone I deeply desire, and entirely on my terms. Pacing nervously around the room, I considered various escape plans. I wondered if in this world brides ever had a say, or was ritual enough to seal the deal. With this in mind, I turned back to the lady. How is the ceremony going? Could you tell me in detail? I asked her. It's a normal process, she sighed. The priestess of the goddess conducts a service in the temple. During the ritual, she binds the couple with an unbreakable magical bond. Great. Indestructible. Simply perfect, I muttered to myself. Are they asking the bride's consent? I paused, holding my breath, waiting for her answer. Yes, she nodded, and I breathed a sigh of relief. Now I knew what to do, and it had to happen in front of witnesses so that everyone would know that I refused to marry Mr. Whoever Harrison. Everyone here may be afraid of Mr. Jensen, just like the owner of the original body was too scared to even come forward. But that's not me. Sorry, Lady Letitia, but there is no time left. If we don't prepare Lady Allison, Mr. Jensen will punish us. A voice came from behind the door. Yes, of course, the lady sighed. So that's her name. And my... It turns out that my double from the parallel universe, and I even have almost the same names. Alina and Allison. At least now I won't get confused and will answer without asking questions. Can he kick us out of the house? I asked, just in case. He can't leave me. He must take care of the widow of the former head of the family for the rest of her life. He is bound by a magical vow, and he won't dare let me out of his sight. But he is only obliged to take care of you until he marries you. If you refuse your chosen groom, he will no longer be responsible for taking care of you, even if you are not yet of age, right? To hell with him and his bullying. He can't hurt her, and I'll survive too. After all, the real owner of this body may be 18, but I have been taking care of myself for many years. Of course, I don't know the realities of this world, but I'll figure it out. I always do. How old is Lord Bouquet? I asked, trying to sound casual. Both maids giggled, trying their best to hide their amusement. Who? Lady Letitia seemed confused. Lord Harrison, I said, rolling my eyes. Ah, Lord Harrison, she finally realized. It's over 500 years old. 500? My eyes widened in disbelief. How long have people lived here? Yes, he is quite old, she said, not understanding my astonishment. But there is little we can do. They had already sealed the marriage contract with a magical oath. Violating it will entail a negative reaction for both sides. Perfect, just perfect. Let's hope they get exactly what they deserve from their magic today. I didn't want to put too much effort into preparation, especially knowing that a scandal was about to break out. They dressed me quickly, and I asked for the simplest hairstyle. No need to dress to the nines for the elderly groom and my uncle's guests. Luckily, we finished just in time. We had barely had time to put the finishing touches on my appearance when the door swung open, and Uncle himself walked in, casting a disapproving glance at our group. "Stop messing around," he hissed bitterly. "Guests are waiting." I silently followed him to the door, but as soon as I reached the exit, he grabbed me by the elbow, gripping me like a vice. "If you think of doing any trick, you will regret it," he whispered furiously, looking at me. "So, be accommodating and listen to your fiancé and the priest." I clenched my teeth harder. What an idiot. Now his grip will give me a bruise. The priest is probably involved as well to make sure the ceremony goes well. Well, a huge surprise awaits them at the temple. As we walked through the intricately carved corridors of the majestic estate, the sounds of waiting worshippers grew louder with every step. The whispers and murmurs of the cloaked guests bounced off the stone walls, weaving a heavy tapestry of anticipation that hung in the air. I held my head high, maintaining a rigid posture, masking the turmoil raging beneath my calm exterior. We approached the main entrance to the temple. Its doors swung open, and we saw a room filled with a soft, otherworldly light of torches, filled with magic. Their light danced across the faces of the assembled aristocracy, tinging their expressions with a mixture of curiosity and impatience. The priestess, dressed in shimmering fabrics reflecting the sacred symbols of the goddess, stood commandingly at the altar, her stern eyes scanning the room. Unwaveringly, she met my gaze and nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly. I couldn't tell if it was a sign of recognition or encouragement, but it strengthened my resolve nonetheless. Lord Harrison, or Lord Bouquet, as I irreverently nicknamed him, waited at the altar, a venerable figure with silver hair that hinted at centuries of his existence. There was grace in his figure, but his eyes betrayed the hunger of a man who had held power for too long. Uncle Jensen held my hand tightly as we crossed the threshold, his fingers digging painfully into my flesh, a reminder of his earlier threat. I absorbed the pressure, focusing the pain. Yes, it would be a ceremony, but not the one they all expected. According to tradition, the priestess began with a ceremonial greeting, her voice resounding majestically throughout the temple as she beckoned me forward. When the moment of truth arrived, the congregation fell silent, every pair of eyes fixed on me, awaiting the oath that would determine my fate before the ancient lord. I stood before them, feeling the weight of their gaze, like the pressure of the depths of the sea. But my voice, when it finally broke the silence, was clear and decisive. "I must refuse," I declared, my words cutting through the silence like a razor blade. A collective gasp rose from the crowd, rippling through the assembled nobles and causing a surge of shock and insult. Uncle Jensen's fingers twitched, and I saw his face contort with rage, but his reaction was nothing compared to the violent commotion that ensued among the guests. The whispers became a maelstrom of voices, and the consequences of my refusal spread like wildfire. The priestess raised her hands, calling for order, but the angry muttering did not subside. Amidst the chaos, I caught Lord Harrison's eye. His face remained impassive, but behind the calculated mask hid the cold rage that I intended to provoke. I knew that I had exploded a bomb in the middle of this outdated society that would reverberate through its very foundations. But in that moment of rebellion, I also knew that I had freed my spirit from the shackles of my predestined life. Uncle Jensen finally loosened his grip, his hand falling to his side. He turned to face me, rage seething in his eyes. "You doomed yourself, girl," he seethed, but I simply met his unwavering gaze. The wedding was averted, and although my future was uncertain, dancing on the edge of social exile and renunciation, I felt a surge of exhilarating freedom. They will understand that I am not the obedient niece they thought I was, but a stranger from a distant place where the spirit longs for freedom and where the heart chooses its own path. As I stood there, the chaos in the temple grew, the silence caused by my refusal buzzing louder than the protests around me. My heart began to beat not from fear, but from frantic joy. Uncle Jensen's machinations around him collapsed, and I enjoyed the momentary triumph. The priestess, the keeper of traditions, remained a mystery. Her face was inscrutable, her hands were still raised. She looked around the room, witnessed a storm of disbelief and indignation. Then her gaze fell on me. "This is the will of God," she declared, her voice cutting through the noise. "We must all respect Lady Allison's choice." Lord Harrison, who had thus far maintained his composure, nodded slowly, giving me an appraising look that seemed to acknowledge the turn of events, perhaps even with a hint of admiration for my courage. The murmur gave way to a reluctant silence, and the priestess's statement lent a semblance of dignity to the situation. Once the immediate shock subsided, Uncle Jensen was the first to come to his senses. "You will regret this day," he spat, turning on his heel and leaving the temple, giving me one last venomous glare. I turned to Lady Letitia, my supposed mother in this world, her eyes shining with tears, but there was something else in them. Perhaps pride or relief. The guests began to leave, their departure accompanied by a quiet, continuous noise, similar to receding waves after a storm. Lord Harrison came up to me just as the last of them left. "Young lady," he began in a surprisingly gentle voice, "your spirit reminds me of a man from centuries past, a man who valued freedom above all else. I will not feel any hostility towards your decision." With a respectful bow, he walked out of the temple, leaving behind a centuries-old legacy in a single moment of understanding. As the temple emptied and the night air set in, Lady Letitia came up to me and hugged me. "My brave girl, now you are free. But where will you go?" she asked, her brow furrowed in concern. I hugged her back, knowing that this body was hers and not mine, but still feeling the warmth of her motherly care. "I will find my way," I reassured her, "and perhaps in doing so, I will unravel the mystery of how I got here, and how I can get back home." In the days that followed, I left the estate, traveling into this strange but familiar world with its magic and politics. Every step was a discovery, every meeting a lesson. Although I knew my journey would be filled with uncertainty, there was an exciting promise of freedom in the unknown. And so, with my spirit freed and my future unwritten, I set forth, carrying with me a story that transcends worlds, a story of defiance, courage, and the tireless search for my own path in the world, wherever it may lead. The story of Lady Allison, a girl who refused to allow her spirit to be ensnared by the whims of those who claimed power over her destiny, will resonate throughout the ages, a testament to the indomitable will that lives within each of us. For in this ancient world, as in mine, the true essence of life has been preserved. No destiny is carved in stone, and even the greatest sagas begin with the simplest choice: I must refuse.